Buen día, mi nombre es César Belloso, les doy la bienvenida.
Today is Tuesday, August 27. This panel, Facundo Echeverri, will talk about sustainable production of food. I remind you that you can start writing your questions during the presentation in the section you have at the right of your screen, and also remind you that in the top part of your menu on the website, there is a button called Untitled Participants, so you can check there the names of the speakers. You can even arrange meetings with them. And in Aapresid space in the commercial hall, you will find live interviews and information about Aapresid program and content for participants. And remember to use the hashtag Congreso Aapresid to interact and learn more information about the Congress. I will introduce Facundo Echeverri. Thank you very much, Facundo. He's the global president of public affairs in Danone. He has a degree in economy. He has been a scholar or a trainee in the Department of Regional Development, and he has also been regional director of corporate affairs for Danone in Latin America. And he has been a member of the Advertising Argentine Council, and he has been the secretary of the Professional Council of Public Relations in Argentina. He has also been co-chair of the International Public Alliance. Before joining Danone, he was the director of corporate affairs for Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay in Brashtec Tobacco. Welcome, Facundo, to this Congress, and I just give you the floor so you can talk about the global challenges for world food production. Thank you, Cesar. It's a pleasure to be in this Congress where we transmit so much important knowledge about the food production sector in Argentina. This is an international discussion, and I just want to share what we are seeing at the international level, and so we can interact through questions on challenges and opportunities. This is an open discussion about the future of the food system, not only regarding the primary aspects of the value chain, but rather all the system and what is the impact on society. There are different points of view on this discussion, which is becoming more and more relevant. This is a comprehensive view of health and environment. This has been expressed in public policies, and so they are evaluating production systems to see how they can be improved. This is a high-level discussion, so much so that next year, 2021, a UN World Conference will be hosted on food system. This agenda is designed by the FAO. They had to change their viewpoint. Maximo Toreo from the FAO, people from the Food and Beverage Alliance I was just talking about are right. we need to give people food of high nutritional quality. So this discussion is a full discussion right now. A preparation agenda. An agenda is being prepared for 2021 because many topics are being addressed here. This has to do with the health of the planet, and the discussion is how to convert this depleted system into a sustainable system, sustainable from different points of view. In many countries are discovering the benefits of no-till. Countries that still didn't implement this agricultural practice or didn't implement any system to take care of soils, and this in the throughout the value chain. They are only now taking consideration of how good agricultural practices as no-till impact on carbon sequestration. There is a huge demand for new information, and the challenge is to provide further detail of what happens in each value chain. The value chain of milk, of soybean, of almonds. So the consumers start having more and more information. They are becoming more aware of the environmental impact of food production. They become more aware about climate issues, water, biodiversity. But also we are sort of projecting a social dimension of how works are done, how work is done in the countryside or in the farming sector, and the health of the people working in the farming sector. And also they become aware and are concerned about animal welfare, about animal handling. And this should be decided at the central level of institution. And so also they are interested in asking things about a specific input, how a specific raw material has been produced. And trying to find out information, we found deficiency, but we also find strength. So it is a good thing to communicate this to consumers because this is even a marketing strategy. This challenge implies trying to get more knowledge on trying to obtain more information. And so examples come to light, examples of practices, examples of innovation stories that add value. Now then, this knowledge-based solutions and providing broader information also leads us to analyze nature-based solutions. And you know that you in Aapresid are always talking about the richness of soil and how biology contributes to production. But we also need to value the soil and value the solutions for carbon sequestration. It's important to measure how much carbon is captured and how the carbon footprint changes, how you account for carbon sequestration throughout the supply chain. So this is something that have to be addressed by all of us together so we can give a single message to the consumer. All these things are done throughout the world in the different geographies, so we need to extend that change. The awareness of these challenges, and that takes me to some other topic, is that not all of us understand definitions in the same way. And sometimes it seems that we are talking about different things. An important discussion is the one that has come up with this crisis, which is food sovereignty. Some countries understand it or interpret it in a way they give an idea of protectionism, or, but I think that we need to uh, be careful with that. When we define food sovereignty, even the FAO some years ago, some quite a few said that it was the right of people to define how food systems are developed regarding production. So the food system must be defined by players who are responsible for resources in that ecosystems. When value chains are shorter, have more visibility, and so we can provide more precise information, and we will be able to provide resources, and we know how carbon sequestration can become more effective. When you go when you are detached from that, then the consumer is far away or is driven away from the food that is produced for him or her to eat. So it's important to clearly define what sovereignty is, and we need to be aware that we need to have a comprehensive manager of resources, management of production practices, but we also need to consider how to enrich with diversity the resources or the raw materials that producers have. So we need to become aware of this and to become responsible for this. There's another topic under discussion, the regenerative agriculture. It's defined by different players in a different way. Bioeconomy or regenerative agriculture or organic regenerative agriculture. And sometimes we confuse the consumers. If we talk to the consumer about all the technical aspects, if you talk about regenerative agriculture and you tell them that it includes the best rotation and no-till practice, agrochemical use efficiency, it protects nature, it captures carbon, it considers animal welfare. It also considers the new generation of farmers that do not only produce but also provide environmental service. You add something more to them. So we started to discuss with companies and international institutions that discovered the need to create an international platform to bring efforts together and to be aligned. This was created with 20 institutions. The last company that joined this platform is OP2B. It is one plan of business for biodiversity. This platform works in the World Sustainable Council, World Business Council for Sustainable Development. B2B works on two pillars. One is the consensus on regenerative agriculture as a practice that will solve our problems. We need to start aligning and highlight the relevance of these practices throughout the whole value chain. The companies as Yara, Mars, Nestlé, Walmart, as retailer, we are we are talking about the individual supply chains of the vanilla, of the cocoa, the milk supply chain. And so they should all be aware about agricultural practices that contribute to a sustainable supply chain. This gives reassurance to society. A very important thing is zero deforestation. And sometimes the origin of food production is stigmatized because there are some regions that do not follow these zero deforestation instructions. So we need to have more players as Aapresid, collective awareness, consensus on what we are talking about. There are many actions underway that have to be scaled up. We need that large companies. We have detected things that are correctly done, but sometimes these things are symbolic. They have not been scaled up, so they don't change anything. When you, this is the same as Aapresid 30 years ago with only one farmer that applied no tillage. But after so many years, we have many growers, many farmers that have implemented no-till. And so this becomes sort of institutional. We need many more Aapresids. We need a long-term plan, including a environmental friendly agricultural practice. So everybody becomes aware. All this is the opportunity because at the end of the way, we have a consumer that questions, that presents issues and acts very quickly as compared faster than what happened in the past. 20 years ago, I worked in a FAO team that we were working on the GMO segregated production in Europe. And the result of this study was nothing very relevant. It was a very spread result. Today, you just go to the retailer in the shelf in US, the Netherlands, Japan, or Germany, you go to the shelf and you find a diversity of products that gives information to the consumer, the origin of the product, nutritional facts, and many other information. The diet has changed. Now we are balancing with a flexible diet that introduces plant-based food based on soybean, on oats, or in other vegetables. We have vegetable hamburgers. So all this process is speeding up. And so from the point of view of the consumer, this is providing added value. If the consumer is demanding for our Alpro soybean-based milk, is the consumer is demanding non-GMO soybean, this is a requirement of the consumer. So I have to trace back and try to source that essential ingredient. But if the consumer says not only non-GMO soybean, I also want almonds, And this is not a theoretical thing, it is a practical thing.
So, if we talk about being virtuous, the fact that certain systems in Argentina can do this, well, they can produce food taking into account the consumer's demands. That's why organic milk is being produced in Argentina. Argentina has a huge potential of producing milk with low carbon emissions, and the stigma related to milk production in other areas won't apply in this case. So we have a new value that may be added in Argentina, and it's what consumers are asking for. But we also have this fact: consumers want to get to know the farmers or producers of the raw materials. In Spain, we have programs under which in different regions, different production basins, we have identified the producers that provide us the raw materials to make yogurt. So consumers trigger changes, and those changes are positive for the world and for our health, because the people's diets are improving, getting more diverse. They are not giving up animal-based food, but they are consuming more plant-based food, so the diet is producing a smaller carbon footprint, and it's better in terms of digestion, nutritional value, etc. In Argentina, Danone has been operating in Argentina for over 20 years, and we work with several producers on a daily basis, and we learn from them to create value for consumers, and this has to be done locally. There are no huge companies operating in an abstract world. We are all working locally with identified producers in the different regions. When you work with dairy products such as milk, it's very important to work with the local farmers. That's why we have this program called Farming for Generations. That is, we want to empower the new generations, the young generations, so that they can work for their future. So we work in dairy farms in Argentina, and women are sometimes managing these dairy farms and becoming leaders. This is a concrete example we have seen, and there are also some dairy farms that measure the environmental impact, they produce value, and we also have organic dairy farms. And this cannot be considered in isolation only from the point of view of the producers or from the point of view of the food industry. I don't know what you think about this, Cesar, but we believe that the food system in all countries is closely related to agricultural practice and to what the farmers and producers do. But we also think that the future of the food system is not a black box, or what the farmers do is not a black box, and what the consumers receive is not a black box either, because the packaging has to be recyclable, etc. So we are talking about a value chain which is not related only to the raw materials or to the amount or to what we sell, but it's rather a value chain based on practices, on the way we manage information, and on the way we work jointly together. And this would be a long introduction, but I believe I mentioned several issues that may give rise to questions. Well, your presentation or your comments have been very interesting, Facundo, and we are already receiving some questions, but I would like to think aloud about some of the items you mentioned. If we look at the platform that is science and consensus building, which you mentioned several times, and I would like to thank you for considering that Aapresid is a producers association that works along those lines. You talked about awareness, you gave some definitions, and I have two questions, or two thoughts rather, about those issues. Sometimes regulations come from different scientific fields, so GMO O's that have been in market for over 25 years and which have had a huge impact on the reduction of the use of pesticides and which have improved yields in different production systems. For example, eggplant production in India or Pakistan, or where there's a huge reduction in the use of agrochemicals, and GMOs have been rejected because of a perception issue. Well, some people decide not to eat beef, and that's okay for them. But, well, in the case of non-till, for example, or till systems, there is a concern in regenerative agriculture, and 90% of the world is still using tillage, and this is probably the main factor producing greenhouse gases because of the carbon loss during tillage or because of carbon sequestration reductions. And this is usually not considered when we talk about traceability. So I'm wondering if the world needs organizations such as ours. Why is the food industry not working hand in hand with organizations such as Aapresid? Well, what you have said is totally true and correct. Our company believes that what you have said is right. We have signed an agreement with FAO to talk about these issues. We have also worked with the UN, and the leadership of Manuel Otero at ICA in the Americas is also creating a new scenario for discussions with the food industry. But the point is, Cesar, that Manuel was the first person who invited the industry to talk to the ministers of agriculture and some technical experts in Latin America. He was, well, I've been in this global position for 4 years now. In the past, I was working from Mexico in charge of the Americas, and this was the first time I was invited to a PP discussion to talk about the value chain, including agriculture. So the first time was 4 months ago. 4 months ago, I participated for the first time in this discussion. I also worked with Aapresid people at the climate change conference held in Madrid last year. I believe Danone was the only food company talking about or discussing opportunities of creating this value chain, this cooperation. So we are holding discussions. We have to work together, otherwise there is a risk, which is the other side of the coin, the oversimplification of production systems. So they are stigmatized. Argentina would become, for some international actors, a country where there is deforestation, or Brazil and Argentina are considered a whole package, or people believe that milk production in a model developed in Sweden is exactly like that in Latin America, or people think that the use of agrochemicals is always undiscriminated, too wide. So this leads to closed policies and the issues. The EU announced 2 months ago that it was going to focus on the green recovery, introducing in the COVID crisis recovery funds elements related to regenerative agriculture, what we call the Green Deal, and a discussion was started. We decided Danone decided, or our CEO Manuel Faber sent a letter to the commissioners, to many commissioners, describing our comprehensive view of regenerative farming, but we will only be able to develop a comprehensive policy if we have a discussion with all stakeholders, where the technical experts working in agriculture, coming from prestigious organizations in Europe, discuss with the same experts in the Americas. And currently, these discussions are limited in scope, and this reduces the richness of the discussion, and some prejudice arises, and this creates further issues. Or stigma is associated to the origin of some products, and this is negatively considered by consumers when choosing some products. I understand your point, but I would like to demand a little bit more from you based on the fact that you traveled to France. You mentioned, oh, I was in France, I mentioned La Pat, people who work very hard to communicate non-till, and they believe that in Europe there are many issues from the regulatory point of view to promote regenerative farming, such as non-till farming. Well, this is the EU, and this is not the area where we work. The question is, what is Danone doing with Argentinian producers? What projects do you have? What actions are you carrying out? Because there are many farmers that are already under certified non-till systems that are getting clear results of their positive impact on the soil, following all the principles of regenerative farming, not only as a model to be used, but as a witnessing what has been done for over 30 years. What could you tell us about this? I mentioned this in general terms, but when we talk about the sustainable dairy farm, well, what does it mean? In Argentina, we began to work in the development of a protocol to be able to agree on the assessment method, because if we have to give value to what is being done, we have to decide how it will be assessed and how to find the value. In Argentina, we are carrying out field audits, limited because of the pandemic. We launched this project a few months ago, and thanks to the farmers profile we work with, we are holding discussions. And at CREA, I talked to some of the farmers several months ago. Unfortunately, it's not as often as I would like to have those discussions, but this is an issue of joint learning, because if I have milk of this type, quality has already been at La Serenissima a must, but today quality is defined in a different way, considering also elements of sustainable management, not only production, but it's also related to animal management. So protocols are key to be able to make a claim vis-a-vis the consumers, because the food industry is always being scrutinized by what it says it's offering or not offering. So you may have a more serious issue.
que recién recibida tenía que
the interpreter apologizes. There has been a sound issue, but we are starting again right now. Motivation is important, and when we talk to the new generations of farmers or producers, the children or grandchildren of those who created Aapresid want much more, and they want to use good practices. So we decided to support with funding, because clearly when you move from one model to the next one, there are consequences for the production, and this has to be considered in the costs and forecasting. If we tell farmers in Argentina that we want to develop a relationship that shouldn't be based on random milk procurement, but if we tell them that we want to work with them in the mid and long term, well, these are positive discussions, and we will see results because they need time. There is a process here. In the case of funding, well, sometimes we have to run tests to be able to define the models that are best for each area.
In the case of organic milk, this is something that we're seeing more and more. We are working on certification in order to support a farmer to certify organic milk. You have to apply for SENASA. And so we are working on that. Guidelines are the same in all countries. You can work only with some specific farmers, and you have to be based in objective soil practices, and carbon certification is something we are working on. It's what we call science-based target, because today it is not very clear for a food company that invests in a farmer or helps the farmer to undergo the transition, who stays with the carbon certificates, how that carbon, sequestrated carbon is traded, what will be the offset in the value chain. So there are challenges that not only are a fact in Argentina, they are worldwide challenges. And so we have the challenge of each country. What is the context in each country? This is a question from the audience because I want to include them in this discussion. How do you see traceability as a process that assures food companies, but in the end, the consumers, all that process through the food production through our regenerative agriculture up to the retailer's shelf to make sure that that product is in line with consumers' requirement. This is precisely an comprehensive challenge because the information that we give to the consumer is the result of the original process of the sourcing project, because this will depend on the will depend on the origin of the geography. We are working with the consumer good forum that brings together companies that produce mass consumption products. All the retailers are part of this. Walmart, Carrefour, Danone, Coca-Cola, Nestlé are also part of this forum. This is a joint challenge. Probably all our information processes are not properly developed in order to give the full information to the consumer throughout the supply chain. In the past, we considered the traceability in each individual company to guarantee supply. But this is a new thing. technology is speeding this up and will allow us to improve what we know about the supply chain. But just to bear in mind, in Argentina, there are very important grain traders. Uh, when we buy from them, they are not in a condition to ensure, to guarantee that the origin of the source is sustainable. I've I listen to you with attention, but I go back to this thing of um, carbon sequestration. I understand that the goal of the food industry is not to create a cultural change, but I know that with this certified, carbon certified production, and we in this Congress, we can't talk in any other term. What you measure is carbon, and we always don't want to lose carbon with tillage. But in the short and long term, carbon sequestration is something very important. And we have growers that are already carbon certified, but sometimes they are not able to segregate, or they don't they are not able to, the trader is not able to segregate because he is sort of at the side of this, and he is concerned with the business. A grain broker or grain trader is a facilitator, but the certified grower really is concerned with what happens in the soil because he wants to get his product to the retailer's shelf. Why couldn't we integrate everything? This concept of diversity should also be extended to traders. Uh, can't we achieve a system in which we provide a systemic service to the world that includes regenerative agriculture? That is the the 1 million question for Facundo from Danone. It's just what you are saying. This is the challenge of multi-local. This means the closer you are to the production place, the more you know. That's the problem of such an extensive value chain or information chain. But there is one more element that you are not considering, which is the temporal horizon and the context and the country specific context. In January in US, we were working with a brand of organic milk, Horizon. This is the organic milk that is the best organic milk in the world. It has been certified. We are working on all our supply by 2025 with regenerative agriculture. You need to agree which are the certifications in each geography. You need to agree what the investment levels will be, and you have to make a follow-up. We have to trace all that. This is a challenge that can only be met or faced by large food companies. we can do this at the short, at the medium and long term, but the conditions and the terms of this agreement has to be followed and complied with by both parties. The good news, Cesar, is once we complete this, we start to work with institutions willing to fund this kind of projects on the basis of the environmental issues. And so you're able to find new partners that we didn't have in the past in this common project. Examples that I can give you, unfortunately, are outside Argentina, but there are initiatives, transition initiatives that are starting in our own value chain, which is different from the value chain of growers in Aapresid, because we are more in the dairy sector. In the north of France, we have more examples, in Spain, in California. So regenerative agriculture is not restricted to grain. That can be applied at different production, types of production. And I tell you that in each case, we find different qualities depending on the players participating, and also depending on what country we are talking about. In Mexico, we developed the milk basin in a region, and we have 4 new small milk producers that put in place sustainable practices, production practices, and the main supporter was the government. At the end, Danone said, I want to buy milk from these dairy farmer that puts in place specific agricultural practice. You have been very clear when you said this. There is issue with the fact that food sovereignty adds more costs to the value chain. How can we distribute those costs among the different players? Do you believe that as an Argentinian, people in Argentina or consumer Argentinians will be willing to pay that? It's really, the issue is not price, but rather value. We need to consider that they need to generate a return on investment in the long term. Sometimes you are too concerned about price and you lose sight of the value. When we talk about food security, that means know how food is produced. We are talking about investment and not cost as part of a short-term transaction. And that is the greatest difference. In Argentina, it's not that it can be done. You already do it. It's not questioning whether you can do it. You're already doing it. In Argentina, people in Argentina has the possibility to become a central character in this process. So what you have to think about is how can you continue doing what you're already doing with projections into the future? So this is a huge productive development opportunity. It's not an increase in cost. It's very clear, Facundo, and I take your positive glance on this opportunity. What is considered agroecological transition, today Argentina is already experiencing this transition for the past 30 years. We have improved the soil conditions. This has been proven scientifically. And you know that this is an opportunity for industry to become involved in the process. But in our country, we have many changes in government administration, politics, disregard agricultural activity. Also, an important issue would be processing in the place of origin that would reduce transportation cost. I believe that your message is clear and positive, but it would be a good thing to look at other countries that have already completed that transition process so we can utilize and we can take advantage of that value chain together with those countries that are already advanced on this. You are talking about the soybean in the north of France. Probably the volume that they sell, I mean, the volume of soybean they need is enough. But if you wanted to increase that volume of sustainable soybean, here you would have plenty of surface area for other products as well. But I just put this challenge forward because in general, the situation of production in Argentina, the weakest link in the chain, probably there is a positive impact that the government is not aware of or the politicians are not aware of. So we need to build a bridge so that the industry joins us and takes advantage and utilizes this added value. I think that Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay are in a condition to provide this advantage. I think that this is an important message. I don't have any more questions. I don't want to use your time anymore. I want to thank you for this conversation, for this discussion. We remain open as Argentinians to build these bridges between industry and production. I think that this is the way to make sure we will able to achieve what you are suggesting. Thank you very much, and thank you for your participation in the Congress. I thank you